forestry.
Am I supposed to start? Hello? 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 Hello?
Hello.
Hello?
Hello. Hey, last sir. One is remember. At last, sir is the president of the MASME, that is the Maharashtra Association of Social Work Educators in Mumbai, and the principal of the Forum Pune and Rotary Club of Pune West. So, with the huge and the great biodata of this Dr. Deepak Walwalkar sir. So now I'm requesting to Walwalkar sir. Over to you, sir, and your valuable guidance to this FDP, Atal FDP program is important. And the topic is hypothesis, concept, construction, and statistical tools and the testing of the hypothesis in social work research. So now over to you, sir. Thank you very much. Waluga, sir. Hello. Hello, Waluga, sir. Hello. Hello. Hello.
Hello, sir. Hello.
हाँ सर, हाँ सर.
आवाज येतोय?
हाँ येतोय सर, येतोय.
मी शेअर करतो स्क्रीन.
Yes, sir. Hearing.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Is it okay? Hello?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's okay, sir.
Okay, sir. Okay, okay.
Shall I start?
Yeah, yeah, sir. Please, sir.
Okay. Okay. Yes. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning, and I'm really happy that today's faculty development program is organized by CyBER. So I must congratulate CyBER management and principal, as well as Dr. Sonia Rajput for giving me this opportunity. I must also congratulate everyone because there is really a need of faculty development program and research, and you have taken a lot of pain to organize this. So once again, congratulations. And let me start my topic. Today's topic is hypothesis, concept, construction, and statistical tool for testing of hypothesis. I have planned my lecture in such a way that initially I will speak for about 45 minutes to 1 hour, and then we'll give some time for discussion. Is it okay? Yeah. Hello?
Yeah, is it okay, sir? Okay,
Yes.
okay, sir.
Yes. So I'll proceed further. I have planned my lecture. First is hypothesis concept. So I'll start with the meaning, basic aspects of hypothesis, functions of hypothesis, and types of hypothesis. First is I would like to communicate, or I would like to express on hypothesis. What is hypothesis? If you see in research, hypothesis is one of the important aspects when you plan any research, you have to hypothesize something and then you proceed further. So what is exactly hypothesis? And people lot of have confusion or misconception about hypothesis and assumption, right? So hypothesis is a possible answer to the solution. It is a tentative guess or it is an educated guess. Educated means a proper calculated knowledgeable guess or guessing, and it's a tentative solution to research questions or problem. Hypothesis is, as I told you, that in research, any research, hypothesis is one of the important steps. And formulation of hypothesis is one of the very important steps in research process. In research, once the researcher decide objectives, he further frame hypothesis, test it, test hypothesis, and to prove it right or wrong, it is the responsibility of the researcher to test the hypothesis. Generally, null hypotheses are tested. Here, let me make it very clear that in some research I have seen hypotheses are taken, but they are not tested. Scientifically, when you take any hypothesis, it has to be proved or disproved. It has to be tested statistically, it has to be tested, and then only we can draw a conclusion after. So statistically, when you test a hypothesis is a very, very crucial, and you have to test the null hypothesis, right? Yeah. So when we say it must be within the scope and framework of study, when you take any hypothesis, it has a relevance, it has to have a relevance with your scope and framework of your study. It must be related to your objectives and the research question. So when we frame hypothesis, one thing is very clear, that it must be related, relevant to your objectives and the research question. On the contrary, I would say that when we decide objectives and research questions, on the basis of that, we frame the hypothesis. And then in research, you can have a core hypothesis and in secondary hypothesis, which can be tested. The hypothesis is a very powerful tool in research process to achieve or dependable knowledge. As I told you that on the basis of hypothesis, it facilitates you to draw perfect conclusion. It facilitates you to draw the inferences, research inferences, because it tests the association between the variables and among the variables. It helps the researcher to relate theory to observation and observation to theory. In research, what is important is on the basis of your research, you go to theory, particular theory, you frame a theory. In vice versa also, on the basis of a theory, you frame hypothesis too. And on the basis of a theory, you draw certain observation, you make a certain observations and make a proposition which can be further converted into proper theory. Hypothesis provides direction to research. What is the significance of hypothesis? Hypothesis facilitates you, it gives you proper direction to your research, and therefore it is important. Many people say that, can we do research without hypothesis? The proper or scientific answer is no. If you do the scientific research at a PhD level or any other level, hypothesis is must. Only under the explorative research, we can say that when there is no theory or this area is unexplored, then you can do away with the hypothesis. Now, for example, so I'll give certain example that how to draw or what is hypothesis. For example, I have taken his alternative hypothesis. H1 stands for alternative hypothesis. Suppose I said I have to test the association between income and malnutrition. Are they associated or not? So I'll frame a hypothesis that there is an association between income and malnutrition. I'll come to independent and dependent variable later on. But here I'm taking only one example. And how to draw the null hypothesis, how to frame the null hypothesis. Here null hypothesis is marked as H0. And I say that income and malnutrition are independent. Both these variables are independent, they are not associated. Or in other words, we can also reframe null hypothesis that there is no association between income and malnutrition, or there is zero association. Null association means, null hypothesis means there is no association, there is no relationship, there is zero relationship between income and malnutrition. Is that clear to everyone? I hope it is clear. Now we shall go forward. Again, if I take one more example, which is very relevant example in today's world, that there is association between hygiene habits among the people and the possibility to get coronavirus infection. I have taken very recent example for hypothesis. That is there an association between hygiene habits among the people and possibility to get coronavirus infection? Null hypothesis can be there is no association between hygiene habit among the people and possibility to get coronavirus infection. Here we are testing whether there is any association between hygiene habits among the people and possibility of getting coronavirus infection. Likewise, you can frame the hypothesis that is a negligence, lack of awareness, or low immunity and a corona. For example, suppose I say that people's negligence is very much associated with possibility to get coronavirus infection, or lack of awareness. There is no association between lack of awareness and getting the coronavirus infection, or we can test low immunity and coronavirus association between. So we can say there is no association between low immunity and getting coronavirus infection. Now, what are the points to be taken care of, or what are the important points when we frame the hypothesis? How to construct the hypothesis? Hypothesis has to be very scientifically constructed. It has to be framed or designed very scientifically. So the construction of hypothesis, what measures one should take? What are the guidelines? So first point is that it must be within the scope and framework of your study. What you are studying, suppose for example, I'm studying there is a relationship between lack of awareness and getting coronavirus infection. And if you are designing any technical aspects of infection, so that is not your, within the framework of your awareness, because you are only testing, this study is only focusing on awareness and the coronavirus infection. So if you want to test it further, then you need to add those objectives also. So one thing is very, very important. When you design your research, your scope must be restricted, your scope must be limited. Your framework and the design of your study must be restricted to particular objectives. So suppose you say 1, 2, 3, 4 objectives, and your research question is that the people's negligence is causing coronavirus infection, or is the lack of awareness is very much associated with the coronavirus infection. If these are your basic research questions, and accordingly you can frame your hypothesis. Second important aspect of hypothesis is, in construction of hypothesis, variables indicating relationship must be testable through empirical procedures. As I told you that when you take hypothesis, it has to be tested. Now what we test the association between two variables or more variables. So minimum 2 variables are required, and you test the association. As I told you that lack of awareness is one variable, which is an independent variable, and possibility to get infection or the knowledge could be, and you have to test both these. So these variables, independent variable and dependent variable, are very, very important and crucial when we construct the hypothesis. This is the heart and soul of any hypothesis. Hypothesis without proper variables or sub-variables or testable variables, then it would be difficult for you to test the variables. Here I would like to state that many times when I go through examine some research, I have seen that in hypothesis, variables are not clear, or there are n number of variables. So you have to have a very clear cut designation or clear-cut indexing of your variable, listing of your variables, and then only possible testing is possible. Third is statement must be very specific and clear. There should not be any ambiguity in the statement. When you draw the hypothesis, it has to have very specific and clear cut. For example, I say that there is an association between negligence or hygiene habits and possibility to get coronavirus infection. I mean, making very clear what I am supposed to test, that my objectives are whether to test the negligence or to test the hygiene habits among the people, and it is effect on coronavirus infection. Suppose so, therefore, in this particular thing, I make a statement that negligence or lack of awareness about hygiene habits and coronavirus infection, they are associated or not associated. So in null hypothesis, I may say that there is no association between the awareness of the people or hygiene habit and the coronavirus infection. Very specific, to the point, perfect variable, listing of perfect variable, and making clear-cut statement. Many times there is a possibility or there are likely to be possibility, like the statements are made. Don't make a very simple statement. It should not be a very confusing statement. Or we can make say so and so. I mean, the lack of awareness, negligence, hygiene habit, and so on, blah blah blah. So, and coronavirus infection are associated. That is also not correct. You can list out hypothesis 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 like that. Has to have two variables. One is independent and second has to be dependent variable. Statement must be testable through available techniques. Whenever you make a statement, see that there is a possibility of testability. It has feasibility of testing. If there is no feasibility of testing, then that is not a workable or statistical true hypothesis. Many times we take a statement in such a form that the hypothesis is not possible to test. You cannot, I mean, some people say that possibly, or there is a possibility of getting infection due to such and such factor. So that is not a correct statement. Or in a hypothetical statement, you should not have an assumption kind of things. There should be clear-cut understanding about the variables which is to be testable and which can be statistically testable, because statistical testability is very, very important. Many times I have seen that people are testing yes, no, or ambiguous no, or both like this along with other variables. It is not, many times it get clash and then your hypothesis cannot be testable. Next point is that statement should be within the framework and the logic of existing body of a theory. Generally in research we said that the hypothesis should be based on some theory or some logical reasoning, some logical theory. When you say logic, it has to have some rationale. You cannot take a hypothesis which is not testable or which is in vacuum or which is ambiguous in statement or which is too complex in statement. It has to have within your framework, and why you have taken this, it has to have some logic. When you say that some logic, there must be some rationale behind us, and the rationale is behind is to understand the particular objectives, to get the solution for particular thing. And as I told you, that hypothesis has to have some kind of body of theory. It should be based on some theory, some conceptual thing. So as I told you, that theory leads to hypothesis, testing of hypothesis, drawing inferences, make a proposition, that becomes your theory, and the theory further can lead to proper hypothesis also. So this is, suppose we say that now, suppose we are testing that after the introduction of the vaccine or invention of the vaccine, there is a possibility of herd immunity. Okay. And you have tested this hypothesis, you have made a proposition about this, you have made a theory, So maybe after 2 years, 3 years, you can test it further that yes, herd immunity can be developed if there is a proper vaccination. So these are all some of the things which I would like to make it very clear. Next is give a focus on variables to consider in the study. As I told you that when you design your objectives, when you design your basic research question, make a list of variables. What are the core variables? What are the sub variables? For example, suppose I say that immunity. Immunity is suppose a variable. I mean, immunity among the people is a variable. Then immunity, there can be a sub variables because immunity is a complex term, and immunity is associated with number of factors. Your health conditions, your vaccination if you have already taken, your food habits, your intake, your medicines, all these things factors are. So these can be developed into sub variables and which combined together put into a immunity, and that immunity can be again tested with the infection of coronavirus. So all these core variables and the sub variables. Another example I would like to give that the standard of living. Standard of living is again it includes so many things in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Use of various item, luxury, then all sort of things, your house, your accommodation, your various kind of arrangement, luxurious arrangement, your vehicles, your income, all these factors, your health condition, your quality of life, so many factors combined together put standard of living. So under the standard of living, you can list out sub variables also. Am I making clear? Is that clear to you? Yeah. Then next point is that indicate potential relationship between key variables in the study. As I told you that core variables or the key variables and under that sub variables indicate potential relationship between key variables. Am I audible? Hello?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, audible.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
fine.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Okay. Next point is that, as I told you, that indicate a potential relationship between the variables. So we indicate the potential relationship and then we test the relationship. As I told you that in negligence, an association between possibility of getting infection. So we want to test the potential relationship between negligence among the people, or not using the mask, or not cleaning the hand properly, could be a various aspect, and we test the association or relationship between getting infection about the coronavirus. Next point is that health provides the direction to the study. One thing is very clear that when you take objectives, suppose you have 3 objectives, then in each objective you must have a proper design or frame constructed hypothesis. So if you have 3 objectives, make a 3 core hypothesis. And then you can have a sub hypothesis within that. You can have a statistical hypothesis to test this thing. So it's not like that. Many times people say that, no, sir, I have made only core hypothesis and that is tested. I have tested and it is proved or disproved. But in core hypothesis, again, as I told you that, for example, the lack of awareness. Lack of awareness includes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then you make a hypothesis, sub-hypothesis or statistical or workable hypothesis. You test it and then you combine together. You say that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 indicates awareness. Awareness level is high, moderate or low. And then against that lack of awareness, you test with the getting infection of the coronavirus. Now, I am giving more examples so that it is very easy to understand. Yeah, so you can ask me after that any questions if you have, but I'm trying to make it simplify so that you can understand. The more example I'll give you, it will be more helpful to you also. And last point related to functions of hypothesis is that it helps, it facilitates, it directs you to your study. Now you cannot do any study in vacuum unless you have some direction, unless you have some hinge, unless you have some pathway how to go about research. Many times students ask me, sir, how to go about this research? I said that you must have some direction. You must have some clear-cut understanding. So what is your basic first and foremost thing when I ask any PhD students or any BSW level or MPhil student is, what questions comes to your mind? What is your basic research questions? You must be knowing that Newton's, when he, invented Newton's law of gravitational force, the first question came to his mind that why the apple is falling down. This is a basic question. Why it is not going up? Why it is coming down? That is my question. That means then he started thinking, that means there must be something in the earth which must be attracting that apple. So the first question comes to mind, is there any gravitational force? Is there any force which is attracting apple? So that basic research question came to his mind. Then he framed the question, is there any force, natural force or gravitational force in the earth which attracts the apple? Why it doesn't go up? And then he started research, and like that, when you start your research, the first and foremost thing is that the question come to your mind, and that we call it as a basic research question. When you frame the basic research question, you frame the objectives. When you frame the objectives, then the next process is you frame the hypothesis, and that is how you test the hypothesis. If it is testable, it is proved, and then you make a proposition that becomes your theory. Shall we go further? Yes. Now, there are various types of hypotheses. Let me make you clear that there are various hypotheses. Now, you must understand what is hypothesis. So, Good and Hatt have written a very good book on research methodology. And he says that there are broadly 3 types can be made depending upon the complexity and abstractness of the question, or depending upon the complexity and abstract of the objectives. So he said that firstly, common sensial, that is based on a common sense observation or testing common sense statement. I must say that when you start your research, or when we do research, it is basically common sense questions comes to your mind. Now, for example, under this present condition, use of mask prevent infection. Now, this is a very common sense. If we use the mask, if we wash the hands, we can prevent the infection. So, on the basis of that, we can make a certain hypothesis that is there any association between using the mask continuously and getting infection or preventing infection. So, on the basis of common sense also, we can go further ahead. We can frame the proper hypothesis. So he is calling it as a common sensial hypothesis. Next is somewhat complex hypothesis. So in showing a degree of complex relationship between the variables. As I told you that hypothesis tests the relationship between the 2 variables, 2 and more variables. For example, I would say that vaccine develops herd immunity. This is somewhat complex hypothesis because it has to be tested at various parameters. So when herd immunity will occur, when herd immunity will exist or develop or create, when the vaccination is developed. When the vaccination is developed, is it because of some psychological, emotional kind of things or sensitivity that generates herd immunity, or there is something else? So herd immunity also is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 parameters are there. And once you develop vaccine, is it because of the vaccine is developed now, the psychological environment and the social environment is created now, and then herd immunity is generated like that? So this is somewhat because vaccine develops herd immunity. Within this core variable, we can have certain sub variable and which can be tested. This is somewhat little complex one. Next is very complex one. Describe the relationship between the independent and dependent variable is rather complex term. Many times people can't understand. People don't understand what is independent variable and what is dependent variable. And sometimes they take dependent variable first and independent variable later. So one has to have a clear-cut understanding about independent and dependent variable. One thing is very important to understand, that independent variable is the root cause of other variable, that is called independent variable. And the factor which is dependent on certain factor, that is called a dependent variable. For example, standard of living is dependent on income of a particular person. So income is an independent variable here, and standard of living, since it is dependent on income is an independent variable. Am I making sense? I'm giving more example where the single dependent variable may be related to multiple independent variables that are also related to each other. Hello? Hello?
Sir, go ahead.
Yes, okay. Now, for example, awareness, food, hygiene habits, immunity are associated with coronavirus infection. Now here, coronavirus infection or getting coronavirus infection is a dependent variable, and awareness, lack of awareness, food habits, hygiene habits, and immunity are the independent variable. So as I say that multiple independent variables, these are the multiple independent variables. Now mind well, in your research, there can be one or two or at the most three dependent variable. Even one dependent variable is also sufficient. If not, then we can have a two, not more than two, three, but there can be a multiple independent variable because coronavirus infection is dependent on so many factors. As I told you, awareness, food habit, hygiene, immunity, mingling in the public, going to various places, food, taking outside food, so many factors. So these are the independent variables, and getting coronavirus infection or possibility to get coronavirus infection is a dependent variable. So we can test multiple independent variables against the infection, that is against the dependent variable. Next is according to the nature of relationship that is being tested, there are various. So three types we have seen as far as the good and bad is, but there are a number of types of hypotheses also. So according to the nature of relationship that is being tested, there are a number of types of hypotheses. We can say working hypothesis, a preliminary presumption made by the researcher about a topic which has not been extensively studied before is known as a working hypothesis. Many times in research, we ask you, what is your working hypothesis? What is your main hypothesis of your research, which you are likely to test? So here it is a presumption made by the researcher to proceed to your research about a particular topic, and it has to be it has not been extensively studied before. For example, vaccine may create herd immunity. So far, I mean, as far as the coronavirus, I'm talking in terms of the coronavirus is concerned. So vaccine may create herd immunity. It will be proved maybe after 6 months, 1 year, or 1.5 years. Once now from yesterday onwards, in England vaccine is being injected. The vaccine is being given. So I mean, you cannot say that now the vaccine is just given and herd immunity is created. Vaccine once start giving, then it takes some time, maybe 3 months, 4 months, 6 months. So you are not clear. But we can take this hypothesis, working hypothesis, and proceed further to your research, which can be a good workable hypothesis. There is a research hypothesis, say that proposition that has been refined in formulation after collecting some preliminary data. That means you have it. First, workable hypothesis, you don't have any data, you don't have any extensive studies before. So you don't have any idea, and you are making certain presumption, that is a working hypothesis. But here you have some data, which is already data collected is there, or some research is there, and then you are making some statement on framing hypothesis, that is a research hypothesis. Here certain predictive statements are formulated for testing on the basis of existing data. For example, strong immune system prevents corona infection. Now this you are framing on the basis of other vaccination also, that when you give vaccination, it develops a strong immunity system in the bodies, and then which possibly may prevent coronavirus infection. So this is a research hypothesis. I may frame null hypothesis, that opposite of research. What is null hypothesis? I mean, as I told you that only null hypothesis can be tested. Many times I'm very surprised that the students, they don't write the null hypothesis and they said, I have tested hypothesis and it is now. So which hypothesis you have tested? Have you framed null? So when you make a hypothesis, that is alternative hypothesis, it has to have a null hypothesis. So null hypothesis, that means there is no association, there is a zero association between A factor and B factor. For example, we can say that there is no association between immunity and coronavirus infection. As I said, there is no association between strong immune system and prevention of coronavirus. And then you test it. Either it is null hypothesis can be rejected. If you reject null hypothesis, you accept alternative hypothesis. And when you accept null hypothesis, you reject the alternative hypothesis. So all these things. So once when we accept null hypothesis, you reject alternative hypothesis. And when you reject null hypothesis, you accept alternative hypothesis. So it's a vice versa. Then alternative hypothesis is there. I'm getting some noise over there.
Sir, out of
Hello?
130, hello.
Yes.
Out of 130, some participant might have unmuted. That is the problem.
Okay. Fine. So, right. Okay. Shall I continue? Yeah.
Yes, sir. Please go ahead. It is very nice presentation.
Yeah. And then we come to the alternative hypothesis. What is alternative hypothesis? A set of two hypotheses where one says the opposite of other, that is called alternative hypothesis. As I say that acceptance of H0. Now always null hypothesis is marked as a H0, means rejection of alternative hypothesis. And alternative hypothesis is maintained as HA or H1, H2 like that. So as I just now told you that when you reject null hypothesis, you accept alternative hypothesis. And when you accept alternative hypothesis, you reject null hypothesis. It is exactly, I mean, when you frame an alternative hypothesis, when you say that there is no association between two variables, it's a null hypothesis. Make always very clear. Now, or you say that there is zero association. And what we test, we test whether there is any association. We assume first there is no association. Like in mathematics, many times say that A and B is equal to 0. And we calculate the value of 0. We really test whether the A and B is equal to 0 or what. So we calculate the value of 0. Here, same thing, that the awareness and infection are 0. There is no association. And then we test it, and then we prove that there is an association between a lack of awareness and getting infection. Next is scientific hypothesis. The hypothesis has to be scientific, but for type, somebody has, some author has said that scientific hypothesis, which is derived or based on the sufficient previous empirical data. Now you have a already proved testable research data which is available with you, and then on the basis of that you are making further hypothesis. That is called scientific. That means you have a scientific evidence existing with you, which is already tested, and again out of that you can again develop another hypothesis which can be tested. For example, I can give you an example that in Newton's law, he has given Newton's first, second, third law, and then n number of people, n number of scientists has proved wrong, right, whatever it is. And they created some other proposition, they created some other hypothesis on the basis of the existing theory, on the basis of existing prevention, existing proposition also. For example, vaccine creates antigen and antibodies which fights against infection. Suppose I say that this is my statement. So I am making this statement on the basis of the vaccine, other vaccine which is available, and they create antigen and antibodies, which is proved, scientifically proved, which has an evidence base. And therefore, on the basis of that, we can say that the vaccine creates antigen and antibodies which fights against the infection, which is proved in other cases. Now let us try it for the coronavirus. So after the vaccine, introduction of vaccine, does that create antigen or antibiotic? Yes. Now the vaccine creators, they are now making, claim that these vaccines create antigen and antibodies which fights against the infection. But suppose we make this hypothesis, which we test it. So maybe after 6 months, 1 year, or after 5 years, which will prove whether this creates a strong antigen or antibody system in our body, which fights against the infection or not. Now there are statistical hypotheses, as I told you, that a statement about the statistical population that is to be tested out. I am making according to the way in which variable or their relations are described. For example, I can make say more than 50% population has already had a corona infection. So I'm making in a very statistical statement form. But most of the, when we test the hypothesis, most of these hypotheses are, we have to put it in a statistical form, and then only we can test it. So this, for example, this more than 50% population has already had a coronavirus infection, we have to test it or reject it. One author says that is a descriptive hypothesis. Now, what is the descriptive hypothesis? Those that describe the characteristics of the variables. Now, you have to be very clear about that each variable has a definite characteristics. For example, coronavirus attacks on protein molecules. Suppose this is, I say that. Then I'm making that this virus attacks on protein molecule. I'm very clear about the characteristics of this molecule and which attacks it, because this is very crucial aspect of this coronavirus. Very typical or unique characteristics of coronavirus, that is, it is a protein molecule and it attacks on the proteins in the body. This is a more descriptive kind of hypothesis, which can be further also be tested. It is more of a scientific, more of laboratory kind of things. So this can be from social perspective. We need not take this. We can go for any other hypothesis. Now, rational hypothesis. Rational is relational hypothesis. Those that indicates the positive or a negative direction of relationship between the variables. Now here we are making some presumption or assumption about a particular thing, that pollution has a negative effect on immune system. Whether we are making the statement in negative and positive form, and they say pollution has a negative effect on immune system. Many times people use the term impact. I would request all of you, when you are using the term impact, which has to be should be used very cautiously, because the impact is a long-term kind of things, and impact is from A position to B position. Here is the zero pollution, and then you test it at a particular point, there is a pollution level. So what is the impact? Therefore, be cautious whenever you use people use this impact term very liberally and many times very unscientifically, because they don't really test the impact. They see just the effect or influence on the immune system. Then let us come to the, when I say that the hypothesis has to have independent dependent variable. If your hypothesis doesn't have this independent dependent variable, your hypothesis is not a scientific variable. One variable, ideally you write an independent variable first and then you mention dependent variable. Here I'll give an example. As I mentioned here on the left side, that income is an independent variable and malnutrition could be a dependent variable. Having low income, no resources may cause malnutrition. Again, malnutrition is a condition. It's condition created by n number of factors. For example, your body mass, your height, your intake, your immune system, all these combined together put the word malnutrition. So malnutrition is a dependent variable which depend upon so many factors. If you don't have an income, right, you cannot take a proper, diet or healthy diet. So healthy diet, you cannot take a proper medicine, you cannot do the health checkup, all these factors. So income is independent and malnutrition could be dependent variable. Another aspect I would like to take is the hygiene habits, cleanliness, washing your hands, putting a mask, sneezing, all these things, spitting, all these, if your habits are not good, you are likely to get corona infection. So corona infection is a dependent variable and hygiene habit, cleanliness, they are independent variable. Am I making sense out of this? I hope I'm making clear. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes, sir. It is very clear.
Now let us see some multiple, as I told you that there can be a multiple independent variables and there can be a dependent variable. As I told you that in the research, there should not be, ideally, you have a one dependent variable, you can have a 2 to 3. There should not be more dependent variable. You should have a very clear-cut guidelines, clear-cut outline framework about your history. Then here, suppose I say the income, education, food habit, awareness, these are all multiple independent variables and we can link to malnutrition. For example, is there any association between income and malnutrition? We can test it. Lack of education or no education, does that affect malnutrition status? Yes, very much. You can test it. Is the food habit very much affect malnutrition? You can test it. And about lack of awareness among the people and malnutrition, can we test it? Yes, test it. So there can be a multiple independent variable you against the dependent variable and you can check, you can test it whether they are associated or not associated. Now I'll come to the last part, that is these measures of association. Now I told you that what is hypothesis, what are the various types of hypothesis, how to construct the hypothesis, and then after the construction of hypothesis, important stage is the stage testing association. So how to test the hypothesis. Now there are measures of association, that there are a number of statistical tool. Chi-square is one of the tool of testing association between the variables. So here I'm not actually taking the practical this thing. I'm told that tomorrow or day after tomorrow you have a various practical sessions also, how to test the hypothesis and how to calculate a chi-square test. But I'll give you just a brief outline about that. When you take hypothesis, independent and dependent variable has to be there, and then we test the significance. The chi-square test is a test of significance. Whether these two variables are significantly associated or not, or they are not, that we are testing. So it is a chi-square is a Greek letter. What is this chi-square? Chi-square is a Greek letter and propounded by chi square. Therefore, it is known as a chi-square. Hello. Hello.
Yes, sir.
Hello.
So,
Am I audible? Shall I continue?
Yeah, yeah.
yes, sir.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. It is a chi-square test is known as a test of significance because we check whether they are significantly associated or not. And another important thing is that it is a test of association between the two attributes or two variables. We generally, in our research, when there are more sample size, 60 plus sample size, I'm not talking in terms of the small sample size, I'm talking in terms of the larger sample size relatively, we use the chi-square test, and this test can be applied, this test can be done manually also, as well as we can use SPStat, SPSS, Excel, or any other software which help you, facilitate you to calculate a chi-square test. But generally, I have seen by and large, chi-square test is very popular test which can be used to test the significance level and the test whether these variables are associated between or there is any association between or not. So we can test the association between for example, I have taken a very popular subject, which is very popular, previous fieldwork experience or previous field experience and fieldwork performance. I give this example to students in MSW or MPhil and PhD, that if you have a field experience, is there any association having a field experience and a fieldwork performance? May I request everyone to please mute, because I'm getting some noise over here.
Yeah, Vinay Thorat, please mute yourself. Vinay Thorat.
Because that distract.
Yeah. Vinay Thorat.
So I request all of you to please mute, and then after finish my this, then you can have a question, then you can unmute. So,
Yes, sir.
yeah. So we can test. Let us see. This is because field work is very important aspects in social work. So or any other branch of knowledge. So previous field experience and your field work performance, are they associated? So let us test it. So it is a test of interdependence between two variables. I just told you that. For example, income and standard of living. Can we test the association between income and standard of living? Yes. Can we test the lack of awareness and the corona? Yes. Can we check the gender sensitivity and equal treatment? Are they associated? Or in what sense they are associated? How much they are associated? Is the gender sensitivity and equal treatment, is there any association or level of significance? What kind of level of significance? Are they associated significantly or not associated significantly? All these things are very well. Now here I want to make one point very clear, that in every research, when you take and test a hypothesis, there is a misconception among the students, PhD students or MPhil students or MSW students. If all my hypotheses are rejected, my research doesn't hold good. I am not doing a good research. It's not like that. Even if your all hypotheses are rejected, you come to particular inferences, you come to particular decision, you come to particular conclusion. That also is equally important from the further research point of view. So please remove your misconception that even if the hypothesis is rejected, all your hypotheses are rejected, that means your research is also good. There is not nothing. Sir, many times students come and say that, sir, my two hypotheses are proved and two hypotheses are rejected, so my research is not a good quality. It's not like that. Please don't make this kind of a misunderstanding. That doesn't mean that if all hypotheses are approved means your research is good, and if your all hypotheses are neglected or rejected means your hypothesis, your research is not good. Please, it is not like that. What kind of quality inferences you draw, what kind of inferences, what kind of conclusion you draw, and these conclusion has a logic or rationale, and whether these conclusions are scientifically developed or not, that is research. For example, suppose I say that once again I am getting some noise.
Vinay Thorat, please mute yourself. Vinay Thorat.
क्योंकि वो वॉइस इतना क्लियर आता है,
वही तो ना, विनय थोरात.
डिस्ट्रैक्ट.
But your
Yes.
voice is very clear, sir.
Okay, fine.
Very clear.
Right.
Very,
Okay.
as if you are attending the sitting before you.
Right. Thank you so much. So I'll give you example. Okay. So here I will give you one example related to hypothesis proved or rejected. For example, after the vaccination, so vaccine develops sensitivity. After the vaccine, there is a possibility of herd immunity. Suppose I make that there is association between innovation of a vaccine and herd immunity, likely to get a good herd immunity in the public. So this is hypothesis I have developed. And suppose after 6 months, after 1 year, my research said that no, there is no association between vaccine and herd immunity. Immunity is developed because of certain n number of other factors and not because of vaccine. Then what will happen? But still that is a good research. You have come to a particular conclusion And maybe somebody may take this really why this has happened. So here make it very clear that even if your hypothesis is rejected, it is giving birth to another research. It is generating another research. And you can have another hypothesis to prove yourself. Now you must have seen that after the Newton's law of gravitational forces, many people have challenged this gravitational force, the level of gravitational force. One person said that on the moon there is no gravitational force. So all these laws are supposed to be challenged. One scientific theory develops another scientific theory. One law can be, and I would say that law has to be challenged. Theories has to be challenged. Hypotheses are to be challenged. Then only we can have a good quality research. So please mind well that hypothesis rejection and hypothesis approval doesn't mean that your research is of good quality or bad quality, but how you draw the conclusion, how you link these conclusions to your research, how logical you are, and what is the output of your research in the context of social development or the humanity. That is more important rather than your testing. But testing, yes. Then you say that why you take hypothesis then, sir? Hypothesis na karne se bhi research ho sakta hai. No, but when you take a hypothesis, when you test the hypothesis, you come to very specific conclusion. You come to very logical conclusion. You can say that the level of significance between the vaccination and herd immunity is 90%, 95% or 95%. Like you must be now, I mean, watching the various news and this thing, and they're saying that this level of correct, what you call vaccine is now 95% proved, 70% proved. Those are actually tested on the basis of hypothesis. And then you are getting the significance of that particular vaccination. How effective, efficacy. You must have heard the word now used, efficacy and effectiveness. So efficacy is how effective that particular drugs or this thing is. This is being done after the proper hypothesis, testing, evidence, and then you come to particular conclusion. Is that clear to you? Yes. Move further. So testing a hypothesis, chi-square, we need to observe frequency. I'm just giving you the formula and then I can move further. That this is the formula that we need to have observed frequency and expected frequency, which is calculated in the created pro forma by this formula also. In Excel and SPSS it is already. In SPSS or Excel sheet, you have to just mention the independent variable and the dependent variable, and it calculates the level of significance. And level of significance is calculated on the various bases. You are all aware of this, that 0.05%, 0.01% like that. On the basis of that, you calculate the level of significance also. And whether on the basis of level of significance, you say that whether these one variable is associated with other variable or not. Now, as far as the field experience is concerned and fieldwork performance is here, I may draw the hypothesis. My alternative hypothesis could be there is an association between previous field experience and fieldwork performance. But now we generally test the null hypothesis. So for example, many times you may say that the previous field experience and fieldwork performance, they are associated. But when we draw the testable hypothesis or statistical hypothesis, I will frame null hypothesis saying that there is no significant difference between the previous field experience and fieldwork performance. Or in other words, I would say that there is no association between previous field experience and fieldwork performance. So it can be proved, it can be disproved also. For example, suppose I have got a field experience working in the child area. I'm dealing with the child adoption, and I have got experience in child adoption in social sector. And now when you are you appointed in somewhere else, and here you are in HR field, right? And then this particular factor may not be helpful. So previous field experience may not be necessarily be applicable or useful in your HR field, not necessarily. So in such case, your hypothesis could be rejected. So if out of 60 sample, if a 50 has a field experience in the child, this thing, and if you are appointed in industry where you are supposed to deal with the HR people or the employees, then this particular hypothesis may prove wrong. You may say that the child having worked in the child fear or child area is not necessarily us having good experience in HR field also. So let me make it once again very clear that even if your hypothesis is rejected or accepted, your research is of good quality. But when you take hypothesis, it has to be tested, it has to be proved or disproved. And one more thing, that you must draw proper inferences out of that. Now, you may say here that previous field experience in the child area has a little significance in HR field, because when a HR person works in employees family with employees family, then sometimes 5%, 10% having knowledge of a child working with the children is somewhat useful in even in HR field when I work with HR employees. So 10% significant है, but 90% नहीं है, ऐसा भी हो सकता है. Sometimes if you are working as a welfare officer, then you may say that my previous field experience with working with children and women is very much helpful to me when while dealing with the employees in the welfare or in community context. So again, how you put it, how you draw the inferences, how you put the experience logically and rationally, that is very, very crucial. Many a times when you test the hypothesis, many times many students, many research scholars, they don't know how to interpret. They fail in drawing proper inferences, and therefore they say that sir ये तो गड़बड़ हो गया, hypothesis बराबर प्रूव नहीं हुआ है, डिस्प्रूव हुआ है, या फिर इस पे से इन्फ्रेंस नहीं निकल रहे, क्योंकि आपने प्रॉपर निकाला नहीं है significant level, or it is very difficult for to draw the inferences, you may say this kind of. So as a good quality research or standard research के लिए what is important is that test the hypothesis, understand this level of significance, draw the level of significance, draw the conclusion, draw the inferences, and on the basis of good inferences, you can make a conclusion. You can draw certain conclusion. Many times inferences draw करने के बाद में बहुत बार हम लोग conclusion भी नहीं आ सकते, हम लोग discussion नहीं करते, discussion नहीं लिखते हैं. मैंने आपको अभी बताया है, I have told you many these times, frequently I am repeating that. How you logically and rationally explain, interpret, draw the inference and draw the conclusion, and thereafter you can discuss certain aspects. That is in particular variable, my core variable. These, the 1, 2, 3 factor, they are predominantly associated with. 3, 4, 5, 6, they are not predominantly associated, they are somewhat associated. And following 3 factor, they are not associated. In other research, it can be vice versa. In your research, last 3 factors are not at all associated, but in XYZ research, sometimes these lower 3 factors are very predominantly responsible for other things. So it depends upon your objectives, it depends upon your hypothesis, it depends how you logically, rationally identify your again, I am telling that one hypothesis, your testing and rejection of one hypothesis is a good lead to other research also. So when you are giving, it's a chain of hypothesis or it's a chain of research also. It can be proved, disproved again in other research. So mind well, your research is a very unique research. So our research is a unique research because I have taken these hypotheses. They are tested, not tested, and you can very well say in your conclusion that in my research, these are the factors which are very prominently come on the basis of your hypothesis testing. People don't do that, and therefore they come say that sir मेरे research में से output नहीं आया इतना ज़्यादा. क्यों नहीं आया? Because you have not done a proper hypothesis. You have not tested hypothesis properly, and you have not logically explained it properly. Therefore, research may, I would say that it is very, very, very crucial and important. That is hypothesis testing, drawing the inferences, drawing the conclusion, and then explaining each and everything. So I'm just giving just to citing the example. This can be calculated like this, and you can use this formula, and chi-square is known as a contingency table, and this can be done. As I told you that all these manual things can be worked out, calculated with your computer. You can use SPSS, you can use Excel sheet formula, you can use SPStat or any other formula. You can upload this thing, and you can use this. And then you come to this particular last column is O minus observed frequency and expected frequency, and total जो होता है नीचे में 0.9568. This is the value of chi-square. So once you understand the chi-square value, you calculate level of significance. That is your row and your column total, and then you calculate degree of freedom, and on the basis of this you can draw the conclusion. So there are free websites, online calculators are also available. Free online calculator is there. The sourcesciencestatistics.com is very much available, where you can have a free online calculator, or you can use SPSS, Excel, and can be used by calculating chi-square. So in this ready-made calculator software, this will provide you software solution, ready-made software solution. Just enter the values and you will get the value of chi-square test. On the basis of chi-square test, you can draw the conclusion. This is so simple. So what is important? Again, I'm telling that many times students, those who know SPSS or statistical package, they just put any value and then sir calculate chi-square calculate कर लेते हैं. Whether independent है, dependent है, वो उनको कुछ मालूम नहीं रहता है. Many times even I have seen some PhD students, they are just giving the figures of chi-square values and बहुत सारे values डाल देते हैं, table डाल देते हैं. उसका significance नहीं रहता, उसका importance नहीं रहता है. We said, नहीं sir, how you when I said that how you have calculated, सर वो SPSS का आउटपुट है, SPSS ने दिया है इसलिए हमने लिखा है, Excel ने बोला है करके हमने लिखा है. It's absolutely wrong. It's absolutely unethical on the part of student or research scholars to rely upon SPSS values. SPSS is a very good package. What I'm saying that उसमें से जो values निकलती है उसका interpretation हम लोग बराबर नहीं करते हैं. We do many times a wrong interpretation. Many times we put a wrong independent variable and wrong dependent variable, and then we blame SPSS and Excel की उसमें गलत दिया सर इसलिए हम लोग ये वैल्यू, और जैसे के वैसे टेबल वैल्यू लिखते हैं. When you calculate it with this software, what is important is a chi-square value, level of significance, और वो कंपेयर करके आप नीचे में लिखिए since the chi-square value is higher we reject, since chi-square value is low we accept the hypothesis, like that, and whether there is association between these two factors. This is how interpretation is to be done. I have seen a number of theses simply mentioning that level of significance is high, low, moderate, or whatever, or there is association between, that's all. So it is not like that. Researcher must use his wisdom. Research scholar must use his logic and rationale when he draws conclusion, or he or she draws conclusion out of the testing of a hypothesis. Then it has some value, then it has some relevance in your research. Otherwise, simply by putting the values, it has simply ornamental values. It is just artificial kind of things. Then you blame that the statistics we are using for artificial kind of thing, or statistically has just a cosmetic value. No, it doesn't have a cosmetic value. If you use it properly, if you use it logically, if you draw the conclusions properly, then it has a wonderful value. So don't blame the statistics. We don't blame the SPSS. SPSS में तो आप जैसे वैल्यू डालेंगे उतना आउटपुट देगा वो. और कुछ बार मैंने आई हैव सीन दैट मेनी अ टाइम 4-5 पेजेस का एसपीएसएस का कैलकुलेटर लगा देते हैं रिसर्च में, एंड दे से दैट कि आई हैव ड्रॉन द कंक्लूजन, बट व्हाट इज द वैल्यू, सिग्निफिकेंट वैल्यू क्या है, रिलेवेंस है क्या उसका, प्रूव हुआ क्या नहीं प्रूव हुआ, ये सब देना बहुत बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है, बहुत जरूरी होता है. अदरवाइज योर रिसर्च हैज नो मीनिंग, नो वैल्यू. That's all. Thank you very much. Here I will end my presentation, and I have tried to make it simplified. I have tried to give n number of examples to you so that it is clear to you. If you have got any doubt or clarification or any questions, you are most welcome. And so I think I'll stop here.
Hello. Sir, your presentation.
Yeah.
Sir, your presentation is very crystal clear.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Let me appreciate your pains taken for covering very sensitive matters like variables.
Right.
Now, I have seen many cases, as you said, scholar including guide.
Yes.
Not clear with regard to hypothesis. Variables.
Right.
The studies are more complicated. Now, referee becomes difficult. It is difficult for referee to evaluate how this has to be evaluated.
Right.
And the SPSS package, Excel, they keep on putting on the paper the statistical things. And inferences, interpretations are very less.
Right.
Now, hypothesis testing has its own significance in statistics.
Correct.
What common man can understand from that? What is the ultimate output of the research?
Yes.
All research
That's
are
what.
meant for welfare of the community at large.
Correct.
So you made it very clear, sir.
That's why I made it
appreciate
very clear
Thank
that
you so much.
your output, your testing, whatever you have done the testing, what you have to draw inferences, and it has to have a main relevance, make a related relevance to your conclusion, overall conclusion, how it is going to benefit the society, the community. That is very important. And many times, I mean, as you say, rightly say that I should not comment, but many times the guide doesn't do proper hand holding. I'm sorry to say, it's a very bold statement, but I'm very sorry to say that many times, if a, I mean, candidate, यदि research को scholar को नहीं समझता है, तो ये guide का responsibility होता है कि हम उसको बताएं कि how to frame the hypothesis. What is independent variable? What is dependent variable? Many times I have seen the good PhD scholar and even the good guide also, they are not clear about the dependent and independent variable. And then they mess up the research. So who is to be blamed for the quality and standard? So it is onus is, as a research guide, onus is on me, onus is on my research scholar. So both are equally responsible. I would say that when I guide the students, I said that it is more my responsibility to guide him properly. Yeah. Any question, clarity, comments? Most welcome.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
So it was
Thank you, Dr.
very
Shiva.
clear, sir. It was really clear, NS. Thank you so much, sir.
May I know who is calling? Just tell your name.
So, Supriya, sir,
Yes,
from
okay.
Bangalore.
Fine. Thank you, Supriya, for your comment.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Sir, good morning, sir. I am Abraham, sir.
Sorry, your
sir,
name?
I am Abraham, sir. Abraham,
Yes.
sir.
Yes.
Sir, so my doubt is, there is an association between the gender and the fear of corona death.
Sorry, gender and
Fear, sir, fear.
fear. Okay.
Fear
Yes,
of corona death, sir. So
absolutely.
in this regard, I collected data, but
Yeah.
the women respondents are only 25%.
Okay.
So in this regard, can I get a significance?
See, if what is your research title? Can you tell me? Hello.
Social problems of, sir.
Sorry, could you please repeat?
Sir, psychosocial problems of psychosocial problems of the COVID-19 patient, COVID-19 people, recently recovered people.
Okay. And what are your sample?
So 93. I collected data from 93 people. It is for research article.
Out of that,
Out of that, only 30% are the women respondents.
okay. You
So my doubt is, so if I conduct the hypothesis testing, that is, there is a association between the gender and fear of corona death.
okay?
So can I get the significance, because there is a variation between the sample.
See, basically, when you take this among the gender, male and female, and the fear. Hello, am I get?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Is the voice is clear? Yeah.
Yes, sir. Clear, sir.
Since your population, your sample is of both basically 70% male and 30% female, right?
Sir.
Right, correct.
Yes, sir.
And you are making a hypothesis that you can make a hypothesis that gender and the what do you say next variable is fear.
Fear, sir.
Yeah, it varies from gender to gender, right?
Yes, sir.
There is a difference. There is a significance of difference between the male and female. So there is this you can work out very well.
Yes,
But
sir.
since your sample size is 30, I mean women,
Yes, sir.
if you could have taken equal sample size, it would have been better.
Okay. So that is my doubt, sir. That is my doubt.
It would have been better if you take, I mean, equal sample. Then that is more logical when you draw any conclusion. See, because 70% is male population is there. Huh?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So you can draw this conclusion, but provided if you have a better logical is that when you have an equal sample size. But still you can check it whether among the 30 female samples are there, among the 30, what is the percentage of having high fever, moderate fear, and low fear?
Sir.
That you can test it. Definitely test it.
Hmm.
आप ये देख सकते हैं कि महिलाओं में ज्यादा फियर था कि पुरुषों में ज्यादा फियर था, और महिलाओं में यदि फियर ज्यादा है तो उसमें से कितने परसेंट इनको हाई फियर है और मॉडरेट है या लो है, और वैसे ही मेल में से क्या ट्रेंड है. दिस यू कैन चेक इट डेफिनेटली.
Oh. Okay, sir. Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Yes.
So there are questions in the chat box from Mesha Deshpande, Adyarani, and Vanisri. So
Can you read one by one for me?
no, I will request to Vanisri. She should ask the question.
Yes, she can go ahead.
Yeah. Vanisri. If Vanisri is not there, please Adyarani.
Please unmute yourself. Tell your name and then proceed.
Yeah. Adyarani. Adyarani is there.
Sham Pallav wants to raise one question.
That's okay, sir. Okay, Sham.
Yeah.
Sham, please.
Go ahead, Sham. Please unmute yourself.
Mesha Deshpande.
Yes, sir. Sir, actually, I wanted to understand about that chi-square relationship which you have told us. So I got in between. I think I got lost the touch. So I want to know that when you draw the chi-square test of significance, it has to be done between dependent variable or independent variable.
Sorry.
So you told us that drawing a like we draw the test of significance in the chi-square test, and we have to draw that relationship between dependent variable or independent variable.
No, it's not like that.
For one independent variable, maybe four dependent variables are connected. So do we have to connect to all that
It is other way.
variables?
It is other way. Multiple independent variable with a dependent variable.
Okay.
And when you test the significance, you test the significance between two variables, two or more variables,
Okay.
right? And then you draw conclusion after that.
Okay, so it is between two dependent variable and independent variables.
No, not you are making. No, it's not like that. See, when you make a hypothesis,
Yes, sir.
in every hypothesis there has to have independent and dependent variable.
Hmm.
If I think you are not, you have missed my most of the portion.
No, just I have understood independent and dependent variable very well. I just
You
got confused in the chi-square when you were telling that the relationship between the variables if they have not drawn properly. So I just I'm not getting that which relationship is not drawn properly. You don't
no,
say.
relationship means relationship between two or more variables. Is that clear? For example,
Okay.
income and standard of living.
Hmm.
So income is an independent variable, standard of living is a dependent variable.
Yes.
So is there any association or association between income and standard of living?
Okay.
And if at all, what is the level of significance?
That I know.
Right?
The level of significance is that shows the relationship is very poor.
Correct.
and
So whether you
and they
have
are
a poor
statistically insignificant.
correct. So poor relationship, moderate relationship, or high relationship, or very high relationship, like that.
Yes. Okay.
If it is 0.33, then you say that high relationship, 0.66, no relation, like that. Moderate
Yes.
relationship, like that. And poor relationship, like that.
Yes.
So
Okay, I
you
got
test
it.
the relationship between two variables, two or
Two
more variables.
variables. Yes. Okay.
Okay, thank you, sir. The Sham Palu is having questions in the chat box. Sham Palu is there? Yes. Sham
Shyam, you
Palu.
can ask the question.
Yeah, are there any?
No, hello.
Sir.
Some researcher asking me, is this significant? Point is value. It is very difficult to tell right now. That unless you cross check with this thing table value, a chi-square table value, I cannot tell you offhand like 0.05 value or this thing or thing. You have to test it. You have to check it. There is a formula. On the basis of the formula, you have to see the value and then relate with the level of significance and degree of freedom. So there is a table, specific table is there. Chi-square value table is there. Accordingly, you have to test. You have to check. Yes.
I would like to read some questions for those from the chat box.
Yes.
Adya Rani is not getting the line through. I have a question that we form a null hypothesis and then we test it empirically.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
Yes. What is the question then?
That's what she's asking. Are we to do?
Yes, we are supposed to frame null hypothesis and only null hypothesis is tested. And if your null hypothesis is rejected, you accept alternative hypothesis. And if you accept null hypothesis, you reject alternative hypothesis. And accordingly, while drawing, you have to mention this in interpretation and conclusion also. Right?
The second question of Adyarani itself is, effect is short term and impact is long term.
No, it's not a long term or short term. It's not like that.
She has written the question there in the chat box.
No. Many a times people use the term impact very loosely in their research. In their research title itself, they write. But in research, impact, when we say that impact, when you say zero state and then you check the impact. So you have a precondition, post, you have precondition that is zero, level condition from A level to you check the B level or C level. You do some intervention and then you see the impact. For example, I'll give you. Now at present we don't have vaccine. So there is a condition, this is called no vaccine condition at present. Then you meet medical intervention, clinical intervention like giving a vaccine, that is your intervention. And then you check the impact maybe after 15 days, 1 month, 3 months, 5 months, 1 year, like that. So when you test the impact, there has to have a precondition. You have some intervention, then you check the impact afterwards. So many times impact and effect are used very loosely. Right? That is my, it doesn't, whether impact can be a short term, impact can be a long term also, effect can also be a long term or short term.
So most of the experimental researches are impact based.
Right.
So if stone is clear with the experimental design,
yes,
it is very easy.
It depends upon your design of research.
Yeah, impact, as you said, it is not that easy to make a study.
Absolutely.
Very complicated, and it is lengthy also.
Correct. So many times students say that the impact of what you call this government scheme on the people. It is basically impact. It's not. Yeah, it's a common language. It is basically you see that
different.
It is not an impact. Impact you can say after 5 साल, 2 साल के बाद में, 3 साल के बाद में, 5 साल के बाद में आपको concretely impact दिखता है उसका. Correct?
Evaluation study, for instance.
Correct. That's true.
That's it. Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, sir.
Morning.
Thank you for the wonderful session, sir. I just wanted to know what is the ideal sample size to carry out chi-square test?
No, for any calculation of chi-square, minimum 60 sample size is required. Statistically, I am telling you statistically.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Thank
Therefore,
you, sir.
For PG level, we suggest 50 to 60 sample size. Because small sample size, 30 is a small sample size generally. And anything above 50 plus is a relatively larger sample. For statistical calculation, minimum for chi-square or this thing, minimum 50 to 60 sample is required. If it is less than that, you are not supposed to use the chi-square test.
Okay. Actually, we have carried out we have carried out a research project on effect of lifestyle modern lifestyle on women's health. So there were multiple independent variables which we have taken into consideration, and the hormonal effect of these factors.
Okay.
So so I had a sample size of 253 members, but still I was skeptical whether to move on or not.
Yes,
so,
you can verify. There is no problem.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
For small sample size, there are various other statistical tests are there. Feature test is there. For small sample size, other tests are there. For larger sample size, other tests are generally, for our research where 50 plus sample size is there, we use generally chi-square test.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Sir, can we consider the value and the DF of chi-square test, sir? So when we conduct the chi-square test between two variables, the table will come, sir. In that table, there is a value, and the DF, sir. From that, so another column is significant, and my sir told that. So when you have got 0.0005, so that is significant. So, sir, can we consider the value and DF? So actually, we don't know about those two columns, sir.
No, we generally the degree of freedom is just for calculating the level of significance. Degree of freedom is not considered. The value of significant level is considered.
So only 0.
Yeah, you have a chi-square value and you have a significant value. That is to be considered.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Hello.
Yes.
Hi, good afternoon, sir. I'm Mahendra from Cyber College, Kolhapur.
Yeah, Mahendra.
Yes. I wanted to know about the difference between relational hypothesis and explanatory hypothesis. Both are indicate the relation between two variables. Then what is the exact difference between two, sir?
As I told you that there various authors have categorized these. Basically, all these hypotheses are relational hypotheses because they check association between two variables.
Okay, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah, sir.
I have some authors have clearly mentioned what is scientific variable, what is scientific hypothesis, what is statistical hypothesis. Therefore, I have given you various. For your knowledge, I have given you. It depends upon you. So one must be very clear about what kind of hypothesis this is.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much for nice question and answers. So due to the time limit, we are going to stop this session here. The next resource person has already joined. So I will propose the vote of thanks. So
Thank you very much. First of all, I'll express my thanks to CyBER, Dr. Shirod, also all the faculty members, and Sonia Rajput and everyone. And moreover, all the research scholars. I think more than 127 research scholars or educators have joined. And I'm very happy that they have asked a very relevant and valid question. Thank you very much.
Okay.
And if you have got any problem, you can write to me anytime. If you have got any doubt. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Shirod.
Yes. So thank you very much, sir, for your informative and knowledgeable and brainwashing session. You are highlighted and made clear about the hypothesis, concept, construction, statistical tools, and the testing of the hypothesis in social work research. As you covered that the meaning of the hypothesis, correlation of the hypothesis, significance of the hypothesis, testing the hypothesis with the recent example of coronavirus, and the functions of the hypothesis, the types of the hypothesis, how the null hypothesis can test it, and what are the relations. Zero association is having the relations between A and B, as well as the impact level of A and B, and the dependent and independent variables, as well as the measuring the associations and the chi-square test, and the significance of the chi-square test. Like this, which are the misconceptions we have in the mind of the research scholars, as well as in the guide that you are clearly. So on it is really fruitful the session to all participants, as well as MPhil and PhD scholars. So on behalf of cyber management, on behalf of Atal FDP team, and on behalf of Department of the Social Work, I thank you, sir. Thank you very much. I'm grateful to you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deepak, sir, on behalf of the organizing team, CyBER as well, and for XYZ. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
The next session is of Dr. Ajit, sir. We will be starting in a few minutes. Thank you so much. 5 minutes. 5 minutes.
Can I stop the recording now?